And welcome everyone to Brain Swap again, where we are 2+1 today, as you may have noticed. So,
studio.
yes. So, welcome very much. Whoops, sorry, guys. There we go.
We have a guest here, Kaminoko.
As the number one choice of hospitals.
Sorry, that's me.
It's one of those.
And she's one of the number one choice of hospitals, but
So I'm Kaminoko of Anime Convention Video.
Yep.
And I was in town, so I thought I'd swing by and join in.
great to have you, definitely. And so we are here discussing this topic today of the kind of stigma that anime has over here in America, and not just in America, but this idea that cartoons are for kids, and anime is a cartoon, so it's probably for kids. You know, well, it's funny.
And then scary things happen.
And then you watch Parasite, and different opinions happen. So, well, it's funny because up until like the 2000s, the belief was that all anime was hyper violent, hyper sexualized tentacle porn. Because all anyone saw was Dragon Ball Z or whatever.
Extremes.
Yeah, exactly.
The two opposites. Yeah.
And then Pokemon came along, and that really, well, everyone saw Pokemon, so that must be what it's all like. It's kind of ironic. But where have you guys seen that that attitude, that kind of view of anime being childish, if you will?
All sorts of places.
Every time I explain to people that anime means Japanese animation,
Yeah.
in the shorthand, and they're like, "Oh, like cartoons?" I'm like, not exactly.
Yeah. No, it's certainly true.
I do a little bit of running, and one of my running partners, I mentioned that I liked anime, and of course the misconception is anime is what you find when you're looking for porn. Wait, no, no, that's hentai. That's different. There's a difference between anime and hentai.
Different industry.
It's a subset, but it's not the same thing necessarily. And of course, if you tell somebody it's animation, oh, you mean cartoons, like for kids?
Yeah.
So
kinda.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Which extreme is not right?
Yeah. Well, and we
There's a
also
whole
have the
spectrum.
problem, I think, of Miyazaki movies being so popular. So I think a lot of folks that's their entire vector in. And so it's all they've experienced. And yeah, Castle in the Sky was fine for kids. But that's kind of not everything, certainly.
There's so many other things, mature themes, not necessarily sexual, but kids don't really care as much about political struggles or dynamics or history. And so there's so much more depth to anime.
Yeah.
I like to tell people when explaining to them what anime is,
Mhm.
that anime and manga, which I will say is comics, that they're related, and that now I'm losing my train of thought. But I was going to say they actually have targeted to different age groups.
Yeah.
And so I'll give the example. There's anime and manga for office workers.
Right.
So people who are adults who are working and what they go through on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And that usually blows people's minds. They're like, what?
Well, and that gets back to the topic, is this whole question of, when we're talking to people, we can say that, but then, I mean, I know when I say that, people say, oh, okay, and then, the conversation goes to other places, and I don't know that any of that actually sinks in.
Right,
They don't actually go back and watch any of that stuff, so it doesn't really go anywhere. It's frustrating.
They don't really think in depth about it,
Yeah.
ponder. But I think drawing the connection between newsprint cartoons and cartoons as illustrated novels for people, political cartoons are not for kids.
Oh, yeah.
And they're cartoons, so
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I'm gonna remember that for next time.
And there's a lot that's parodied there, and you can say, the newspaper there's a lot more in the newspapers in Japan, and in fact, they'll publish periodical manga.
Yeah.
Manga, what's that? Or the journals that have subsections in them, and they'll follow a story. I point out, you saw the newspaper Prince Valiant. That's not exactly the kids' cartoon, but it's next to it in the Washington Post or wherever. But that's assuming people read the newspapers these days. Who knows?
Not true.
Yeah.
But yeah, like what is saying in the chat room that you'll get grandparents who think that Cowboy Bebop is for kids because it's animation, and because they grew up with Disney and maybe Astro Boy and Kimbo, and you can say, oh yes, remember that thing? Yes, and they were for kids. Well, yeah, they were. But it kind of goes beyond that.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
South Park.
Yeah.
The Simpsons.
True.
Animated, but definitely not for children.
Yeah.
Was it Boondocks?
Boondocks.
Archer. Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, there were a lot of adult cartoons, but they didn't. They were sort of an underground back in the 70s, 80s, 60s.
Like underground comics, you mean?
Underground comics and underground animated movies.
Oh yeah, Fritz the Cat.
Fritz the Cat, exactly. The Furry Freak Brothers, which were definitely not for
Yes,
kids.
not for children.
Oh boy, no.
They dealt with sex, drugs, the political changing of the times, and all those dynamics, and they were animations, not for kids. But for some reason, people forget those. And draw the assumption.
Well,
that
and to be fair, those were exceptions.
Those were exceptions.
Ralph Bakshi would do one weird. You do Cool World, and that's definitely not for kids. But okay, that's some random guy doing some weird, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of it out there, like you say.
Cool World.
Yeah. Oh boy, yeah, that was a trip, in multiple senses.
Friends duking out with the speaker.
Yes. So then the question becomes, what can we do practically to help people understand those? To go beyond that quick conversational things. Are there things we can do, like in society, socially, to help people understand these things?
I think just clarifying some of the misconceptions. No, not all anime is porn. No, it's not all Dragon Ball Z.
I mean, like, beyond that, like, are there things we can do beyond just that? Those one-to-one conversations that could really help,
like a public.
Yeah, something public.
Probably asking for theaters to have.
Oh yeah.
Show the movies.
It's more of an issue, I think, with older generations. I think people like my age and younger are more likely to know what anime is.
True.
Because it's become more and more popular among younger generations. So it's mostly explaining it to people y'all's age.
What was it, the little girl you say? But yeah, it's tough. Well, like Nokudasai is saying in the chat room, is like talking to outsiders about music and saying, oh, techno is this thing. And there's this whole universe of techno. How are you ever going to kind of get them to grasp that?
I don't like
Listen
techno.
to some. I've got some I can loan you.
Right. Yeah. And that's actually a good point. I think one of the ways that we can help is by kind of going beyond and saying, so what kind of movies do you like? You're interested. Let me loan you something. Give it a try sometime.
That genre is an anime also. So
yeah.
If you like this, watch that.
Yeah, there we go.
I think I've seen like blog posts and things like that where people have said, not into anime. If you like this, try this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really big help. Oh, and I'd like to get back to what you were talking about earlier, this idea of like going to theaters and saying, going to movie theaters and saying, hey, there's the Boy and the Beast is coming out. Are you going to be showing it or not? I would come if you would do that.
Puts it on their radar. They start to think about it a little bit more. It's funny. I remember
has started to happen.
Yeah,
more and more.
Definitely.
I saw an episode of some sitcom where reference was made to "Oh, this guy looks like the guy from Full Metal Alchemist," and I said, "He just referenced an anime on a regular sitcom."
Pop culture reference.
Pop culture
Yeah.
reference. And so seeing things like that pop up a little bit more and more.
Yeah.
Well, if a person's familiar with it, their radar will go up and they'll identify.
Right.
Gradually, as those things sink in, people will start to say, "What's he mean?"
And two things on that. One is I was watching a movie called Attack the Block, which is I think about 5 years old. It's a British monster movie. Fantastic. It's quite an interesting movie. John Boyega is one of the stars. He was Finn in Star Wars. And there's a scene where he's a member of a gang, and a couple of little kids are trying to come after him while he's going off to attack these monsters. And he's trying to get them to go home, and he turns to them and goes, "Both of you, go back home, close the door, watch Naruto." And turns around and walks off and says, "Thank you." Like that's exactly that whole idea.
Awesome.
It's pretty amazing. But yeah, and
Don't sit too close. Keep
mm,
the light on.
so yeah, I think that's a really cool thing. I think it's also kind of incumbent upon us as fans to proselytize perhaps a little more than we're comfortable with or used to.
Instead of assuming that people are not going to be interested.
Right, yeah.
It's
I'm
funny.
guilty of that.
You know, it quite often just somebody offering to share or come on over and watch this or something like that will pull somebody in who would be okay with it.
Yeah. And I know I've come across so many people in in working environments where I discover later they're anime fans. You never would know from their cubicle. I'm like, just have a little gunpla out there, a little figurine or something.
It definitely is an icebreaker. It starts the conversation. "Oh, you have a Gundam." Okay, let's talk. And there's a lot of overlap between gamers and sci-fi fantasy. It's just grown so much in fandom. So I think more people are open to that as we look for different areas of fiction that are entertaining.
Yeah.
And so some of the folks who are into those other areas will start to say, "Oh, well, there was this game. It was based on this anime based on this game." Which came first?
Chicken or the egg?
Yeah. Well, and you have so much overlap now where you have MMO fans who will then watch Sword Art Online. And hey, there we go. And because that encapsulates so much of that world, it can draw them in, and then like, "Oh, I like his anime stuff. What else is there?" Well, here we go.
Tell me what you're into.
That you could never watch it all.
Exactly. So Daniel Turrell in the chat room is saying, welcome, that we need to expose anime through American cinema and TV with anime-inspired narrative and visuals. That's a much more intensive approach, saying that we need to get people used to what anime looks like. It's an interesting point. I think a lot of people do have, if not difficulty, I think anime looks different. And so I think getting people used to that is also part of the puzzle.
The stylistic approach.
Yeah.
I would say that a lot of animation nowadays, American animation, quote, either has this kind of slightly simplified anime style, or like it looks more like kind of like The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Or just very simplistic, like something that would be in the Sunday paper.
Yeah.
Sort of the Flash illustration, or the style of U.S. animation is quite different. It's not as coherent as the anime structure.
Yeah.
Even though anime has so much diversity, there's so much of it. Even within that, there's certain...
there are differences, but it definitely is a trend in American animation of making it look more like anime.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gone in that direction.
Certainly, absolutely.
Which I sort of feel like is a loss of creativity on the part of American animators, but it's another story.
It's fun to see when U.S. animators will adopt an anime style. For example, South Park did several episodes where they kind of went into anime mode, and it was a riot, especially for fans of anime because we're going, and the folks who aren't exposed to anime, they're like, yeah, there's something to that.
Absolutely. Now, Dee brings up that some people find anime tiring. And that's an interesting point. One of the issues I find with a lot of people is that because anime often has such a very different approach to storytelling and to action, that there can be so much going on and so much that you're kind of supposed to understand from a show, especially if someone sits you down for Naruto episode 238. You know, like, this is an awesome episode. You should watch this. Well, actually,
frame of reference,
right? You know?
You should never do that with any series.
Yeah.
Here, just jump in.
Unless it's purely episodic.
Yeah, but it's an interesting point that there's more to it than just saying it's awesome. There's also understanding that people are coming to it from their own experiences, and you know, and they just may not have had like as much exposure to a show like I'm thinking of like a very fast-paced action show, which is we don't get visuals that are throwing at us like that in a given TV series.
You know, this made me also think of, if you're introducing someone to anime, it may not be the opportune time to force subtitles on somebody. You might want to go with the English dub just so that they can watch what's going on.
Yeah,
because
great point.
Quite often I'll find myself reading and going back to rewatch because I missed the visual because I was reading to keep caught up with things. So,
or when they subtitle at the top, like the background conversation, and then I always try to read both at the same time because I'm like, I want to really find out.
Yeah,
everything. I want all the details.
And that's a great example of where, you know, we are kind of advanced level geeks in that sense that we're just used to that.
Yeah,
you know, subtitles just a thing. We just do subtitles.
There could be 3 different things going on in this shot, and we can follow it.
But in the early days, when we were getting used to that, there was a gradual period that we went through where we acclimatized ourselves to that. And
I just jumped in the deep end.
Just jumped in the deep end.
I was like, this is awesome.
So Noko Desai, could you expand on that topic there? But yeah, I think that's a really good point, that we have to kind of come to people where they are, as opposed to, you know, it's too easy for us to say, this is awesome, come to me. You know, you must love this thing. All you have to do is watch it. Well, there may need to be more explanation, more exposure before you go there. You know, I had somebody recommend I watch His and Her Circumstances out of nowhere, and I'd seen it, and I was like, and it is one of my favorite anime series of all time, but it's about Japanese high schoolers dealing with Japanese high school pressures, and you have to have some exposure to an understanding of the Japanese school system to really understand what they're going through. So I was like, I understand why you love it, but it's not like the first thing you'd recommend to somebody where you don't know what else they know.
Something that's a little bit less Japanese culture and more storyline they can adopt easier and gradually pick up some of the Japanese culture that goes along with it. And that's kind of some of the Japanese culture that I picked up as I've been learning. I'll see something unusual in an anime that just doesn't make sense, and then I'll watch other animes and I'll see that theme again. Oh, what is this thing? This must be a Japanese culture thing. And then I'll realize, oh, how many shows have I watched that have this in it? I was getting Japanese culture and I never realized it.
Anime definitely got me interested in studying Japanese culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always want to learn more.
And it renewed my interest in the game of Go.
Yeah.
Nice.
A lot of folks are learning a lot of the Japanese games through some of the anime out there, which is really, really cool. Yeah, exactly.
Kendo.
Game anime. It's a very interesting subgenre.
Yeah,
puzzle games.
And that they're often not as much about the game itself. Like Hikaru no Go, it's more about the relationship between the characters. It's like Go is almost a reason for them to be in the same room, more than anything about the strategy of the game.
But you learn a little bit as you
go.
And
there we are. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting issue. So yeah, I think it is important to, I think, go out into the culture and expose more people to anime. I mean, I think it would be neat to see more folks include some of those references in like books and literature, in the stories they're reading. If you can reference these things and work them in, if you can make jokes about Star Trek, you can make jokes about One Piece, right, or Naruto, or whatever. If they don't get the reference, that's fine. It just goes over their heads. That's cool.
But if you do it often enough, then people will just pick things up as part of popular culture. That's true.
That's that Naruto guy you were talking about. Maybe I'll watch some of that.
Yeah. So here's the interesting question. If you've got someone who is new to anime, I know we've talked about this on the stream at to some extent before. What are some shows or works that you'd recommend to somebody who's not into anime at all, who may not even be interested at all, but can kind of expose them to anime in a way that doesn't go into, deep into Japanese culture or into, myths or things along those lines?
I really thought that the Full Metal Alchemist series kind of pulled me in.
Oh, yeah.
It had that sort of European-looking setting.
Right.
There wasn't too much Japanese culture in that. I mean, they did a little bit of ikitakimasu, and some things, sort of every now and then, but it wasn't as full of Japanese culture as, say, Slice of Life High School.
Yeah.
I'd have to pull out a Miyazaki film.
Sure.
Kiki's Delivery Service.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah, Miyazaki's tough because we're hitting and we had this issue in well that's
a whole other argument.
Well, no, but I mean, but also, I mean, in the anime club I'm part of, we get people who get into Miyazaki and then stop because they like Miyazaki and they're like, what else is like this out there?
Well, more Miyazaki. That's it. Yeah.
There's a few bits here and there you can kind of aim them towards. But it's hard. Yeah.
For me though, Miyazaki, I mean, yes, there are differences, but Miyazaki helped me to start to really appreciate features of anime.
Yeah.
The fact that there's never just a sky. It's like there's always like beautifully illustrated clouds, and just the fact that they take that time to look at beauty in nature and in surroundings, and they pay attention to details that would normally be glossed over in most American animation.
That's true.
Except maybe Disney sometimes.
It makes me spoiled. I want all my anime to look so wonderful.
Right.
So yes, now I'm like, if it's not pretty, I can't watch it. So I guess that's what Miyazaki has done for me.
Yeah, that's fair. Certainly. And obviously, I mean, Cowboy Bebop comes up often. I mean,
a lot of sci-fi. Most sci-fi stories get away
like
from
Firefly.
Right. Yeah.
You'll like Cowboy Bebop.
Here we go. It has a similar cast in the sense that like they never accomplish anything.
And the space western.
Yeah, exactly. And Trigun. For similar reasons.
Yes.
Two of the classes.
Well, after getting some of those under my belt, I added in things like Outlaw Star, which had quite a bit more Asian culture and references. But I felt more comfortable having had a few anime series under my belt.
And Outlaw Star has the advantage that those themes are worked in there kind of in the same way that a Western person will add themes of Buddhism into a show, where it's like they're there, but they're more symbols that are worked in for fun and for and to add flavor to it, as opposed to a cohesive, argument for a particular religion or a particular set of myths or whatever. So I think Outlaw Star is a great starter point.
Now Tenchi.
Tenchi's different thing. Yeah, no. Not Elfin Lied. No. Do not go from there to Elfin Lied. That is not a law.
Samurai Jack.
Only if you never want them to watch anime.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I kind of feel like I kind of feel like jumping into NGE was quite elite because
Yeah.
there were
Yeah,
so many that felt like a bit of a culture shock to me.
And that's a great point. I think Evangelion is one of those shows, like we were talking about earlier, where that's something that you don't start with.
No,
You know, for somebody, you know, you'd say you're gonna get there. Don't worry, but we're gonna put this one to the side, and then
it could really polarize somebody and turn them
Yeah.
off to. I can't understand what's these things don't make up. You know, something easily digestible to somebody.
I had this happen to a friend of mine where somebody he watched Evangelion in a weekend. It's the wrong thing to do. And he was fascinated by it, and he watched it, and he was like, "That was really interesting," and I'm never watching anime again. And he came around eventually, but it really turned him off for a while because he was like, "This just is too much." So yeah, the same way that say Haruhi Suzumiya is, it's a fun show, but it's really more intended for somebody who grasps some of the deeper otaku things.
And Miyazaki not so much, but anime has its own sort of shorthand language, all the symbols for emotion and situational things, and those can be gradually introduced. If a person has never seen them before, they're kind of wondering, why is that guy got the red star on his forehead? And he's
so better than for that reason. Better, it might be better than loaning someone a copy is actually sitting down and watching it with them, because then you can actually explain stuff.
That's a great point.
They're like, why does he have a nosebleed?
Pause. Well,
exactly.
So you know how in cartoons people have thought bubbles? They don't actually have thought bubbles, but that's how it's explained that this is internal dialogue. Same kind of concepts are used to explain things in animation that are much more complicated than just So going through those is a lot of fun sometimes, because then people start to pick it up and run with it. And say, oh, that's that.
And something also you can do is, to that point, is anime viewing parties. Say, okay, once a month, I'm gonna get my friends together and we're gonna watch anime, and we're gonna invite anyone who wants to come, and we'll explain things, and you just, you make it kind of an open house.
Why don't we do that tonight?
Good idea. Hang around, guys. We have some plans. But and yeah, you're right, Liquidus. It would be hard to introduce folks to things like Death Note or Samurai Champloo, which is why I would hold off on those. I would start with the easier things and then work your way in, because those are more complicated shows. It's the great thing about anime.
Now, if somebody likes martial arts movies, they'll probably have an easier time being drawn into kung fu movies, or samurai movies, or Kurosawa.
And this is why it's important to,
or if they're into horror, then you can show them some darker anime.
Exactly. So ask them.
Right.
What do you like? Well, we can find something for you. You don't just jump, right into,
you like a mystery? Oh.
High School of the Dead. Let's start with High School of the Dead. Well, yeah. And exactly. If they like live action drama, go with anime drama. Find something that fits for them. But I wouldn't recommend Eva even to somebody who likes those sorts of stories, because I think there's just so much going on again, it's one of those risks where they may love it, but there's it is such a unique thing, Eva is, and it is such and one of the unusual things about Eva is that if you get Eva, in a lot of ways that's worse, because then you're looking for other things like Eva, you're looking for other things that have all these elements in them, and it's like, that's not really representative. But but then you have things like Attack on Titan, which I think kind of like FMA, it's not very, it's set in sort of a Europeanish environment.
And you can jump into that fantasy world without having to know all the Japanese culture or symbols or stuff like that, and still enjoy this crazy story of these giant people.
But a good example of, I know a lot of folks who would not like Attack on Titan. Just the visuals, the overall sort of darkness isn't going to be for everyone. So you definitely want to figure something out.
Started to get into the story, and then I couldn't handle seeing something that looks human eting people. It's just too much for me personally.
Sure, right.
I'm a wimp. What can I say?
I mean, Yoshiyuki Tomino, famously has his own issues with the ugliness of the show. I mean, he came out and said, "I wish it wasn't as ugly. I just don't think it should be that ugly." It's like, it's a point. It's a fair point. But yeah, it's, you got to find the right things. Yeah, I think those are all good ideas. Is to find things that people are going to potentially latch onto. But then I think we should be guides. I think as people who understand
that's a great idea as guides, because we've trod the path and we can explain to others, hey, you may not want to check this out till you've seen a few more things, but somewhere down the line, you might want to investigate Mushishi, or something outside of what you're familiar with, just because it's similar but a little bit different. You might find a whole new area that you've never thought to explore.
Yeah.
So moral of the story is, don't throw them in the deep end without
don't throw them in the deep end. Yeah, that's the way to say it.
A few of them will swim, but way too many will drown.
Yeah.
Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming.
And then they'll have a negative impression of anime forever after.
Yeah. and to your point, I mean, there's a lot to be said for if somebody shows an interest in a certain genre and you're like, I know something that would work for you, but I'm not sure if you like it, sit down with them and watch it, or just learn it. I mean, more people now, I think, get it. Like they understand that this is not going to be like a Hollywood movie.
Right.
So you can be a little more, I think, free.
Or you can send them a link.
Yeah, exactly.
I have younger nieces and nephews, and or nephew and nieces, and I always want to check age appropriateness.
Yeah,
because there are certain concepts that may be a little bit mature for them, and I don't want to bypass the parental involvement by showing them something before they're ready for it. So that's one thing I try and keep in. Okay, you have what age kid? Okay, you're in college. Okay, well,
yeah, and you have just differences in what's acceptable in a kid's show here and there. In
between families.
Digimon.
You talk about the cultural differences between Japan and U.S.
That too, yeah.
There's so many different,
Oh yeah, just from one family to another.
And just what's acceptable to teach at what kid at what age, and some kids mature more quickly than others. And
that's true.
Season 1 of Digimon famously has a scene where all the kids, they've been out adventuring for a long time, and they finally come across, I think it's an old cruise ship that's crashed there. And so they say, great, we're all going to take baths. And so you see them all, and you just see like clothes scattered around. And then you hear like, the girls in in a shower, and then they all run outside, wearing towels and so forth. But it's one of those things where,
wow.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's not what we're used to doing over here. That's just different. And again, to their credit, like they put that on TV. I think they edited out a few little bits and pieces, but it was clear what was happening. And again, it's one of those things where some parents would be uncomfortable with that.
I went back and started watching some of the old Digimon, and I noticed that one of the female characters was wearing something that looked like something, I don't know, like a stripper or a prostitute would wear here, and I was like, this is definitely a kids show.
How did this?
Oh, interesting. But it's different. And it also gets back to that point that you have to be aware of who you're talking to and where they come from. I've come across some people from, shall we say, more sheltered backgrounds, where you don't start with some of these strong. In fact, we were having a conversation. You guys will know what we're talking about when I mention this. Conversation with somebody today where he had his girlfriend at the time said she liked action stories, so he showed her Mezzo Forte. Those who've seen Mezzo Forte know that there are two scenes in the middle of the first half and the middle of the last half that are as explicit as you can possibly get. And he completely forgot that they were in there. And so they're watching like, oh yeah, this happens.
That for
action? Yeah. And that's not his girlfriend anymore. Yeah, because he's like, what are you showing me? Why are you what? Well, I forgot.
Don't look. Hold up the chip box.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot about this.
But yeah, and it's one of those things where it's ooh boy, yeah.
And that's when the parents walk in the room.
Right, exactly.
no, mom and dad, really, it's not all like this.
Yeah, we had the problem a lot.
I work in a very conservative place, and I was just on my lunch break, and I'm watching something on my computer. I think it was like what is that? Gangnam Style.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
that one. I was tripping over it.
Open Gangnam Style.
Right, and I was like, "This is so silly," you know. It's just I know that it's just making fun, but the only thing in English is "Hey, sexy lady," and they're like, "What are you watching?" And I'm like, "Sorry."
Yeah.
In the middle of the conversation, you have to hear the beginning and the end.
You need to know the context. He's making fun of these guys.
Yeah, that is a problem.
Lost in translation.
Yeah.
Lost in translation.
And this one actually the same problem with Perfect Blue is that the mother came in during some scenes in Perfect Blue, which are not for kids. Oh dear, that sucks. But now Psycho New Type puts out in the chat room as well. Another thing is that a lot of folks think that if they don't think anime is for kids, they think it's all action and fight scenes.
Oh.
And thus it's sort of more.
What about the romance?
Right. So they compare it to like, let's say, comic book.
Right.
Kind of
or
cartoons.
Whatever the
Iron
Saturday.
Man,
There we go.
X-Men.
I don't even know what are the action kids cartoons these days. I think G.I. Joe. That's how old I am.
Right.
Ben 10, there we are. Yeah.
I think they brought all that back, right?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Teenage Mutant Ninja
Rebooted
Turtles.
There we are. Yeah.
Transformers again. Wow.
Cool. But yeah, it's a good point. Is that can also be something to shade, to say, okay, you may be familiar with this. Well, here's something like Kiki or like Totoro, where here's something that really doesn't fit into any of those categories. That is definitely very helpful. But yeah, all right, we've been going on for about 40 minutes on this. I think we've covered this pretty darn well. So I want to thank you all very much for joining us this week. It's been very helpful. And yeah, and we hope you'll join us next week. We'll be talking about food in anime.
Food in anime.
Yes. How food shows up in anime and how anime treats food.
I'm getting hungry just thinking about this.
Yeah. It's a big topic. Lots of stuff to talk about. So
Looking forward to that.
yeah, it should be fun. So thank you all very much for joining us. Yes.
After party.
And we will have an after party afterwards. So everyone, please hang in the chat room. We'll give you a link here in a little bit. We're gonna have an after party. We'll be watching something, and we'll share more details about that later. We can't go into anything more specific right here.
We're gonna take a quick break to reconfigure some equipment and run to the bathroom. And I was able to renew my GoToMeeting. So we've got private party going on.
There we go. Yeah. So hang out for a bit little here, guys, and we will get back to you. And thank you all very much for joining us this week. Thanks for joining us this week as well.
Thank
you for having you. Awesome. Cool.
It's a lot easier to talk than type for me.
That's why we do it this way. All right. Thanks, guys. See you next week.
Yeah.
Bye.